we will get started. So today's event is about tree protection. I'm Alice Roberts. I'm the head of campaigns at CPRE London. We're the London branch of the national charity campaign to protect rural England. And we take a lot of phone calls from people who are concerned about green spaces in London. But one of the things that that people often call us about is about trees being felled in their local area, and more generally concern about tree protection. And this has not been something that we've historically been able to help a huge amount with, but we tend to try to put people in touch with other people or other organisations who can help. But it is, let's say, something that that our members particularly find extremely distressing, and I'm sure that you would have similar experiences of people, or indeed yourselves, having had trees felled in the locality, and you know, feeling very distressed about that. So it's been on my mind for a long time to try to do something where we can all find out more about how we can protect our trees locally, and that's really what today's event is about. So we have 3 speakers. Each one will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll open the room up to questions. But if you could put questions in the chat, that would be really helpful. And then, depending on how many we have and how much time we have, we'll either ask those questions on your behalf or ask you to ask the question. So we keep going till 12:30, but if we have a lot of questions and a lot of interest, then we will keep the room open till 1:45. But we do understand, sorry, we keep going till 1:30. We'll keep it open till 1:45 if people would like to stay and continue to listen or ask questions of our speakers. So without further ado, our speakers are going to be Jack Taylor from the Woodland Trust, Louise from the Friends of Finsbury Park, and Iozzi from the Haringey Tree Protectors, in that order. So I'm now going to hand over to Jack to get us started. And Jack, if you could introduce yourself before you start, that would be great.
Sure thing. Thank you, Alice. Hello, everyone. I am Jack Taylor. I'm the Programme Lead for the Woods and Threat Team at the Woodland Trust. So I'm going to be talking to you today about protecting woods and trees, a little bit about what we do and about what you can do as well. I assume you can see that all good, the presentation there, Alice? All fine?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, super. So, Woodland Trust, just touch briefly on this to give you a bit of background to who we are. We are UK's leading woodland conservation charity, focused really just on primarily woodlands, established about 50 years ago now, and quite a few members and supporters backing us as well. We have a few sort of key aims, which are really around sort of protecting ancient woods and ancient and veteran trees and our most important woods and tree habitats, restoring native woods, trees and wildlife for the future, creating new sort of habitat and doing more sort of planting of native trees, and also inspiring people to get involved and enjoying access and value woods and trees as well. These are some of the key threats that I deal with on a sort of daily basis, myself and my team. We are very much mostly involved in development issues, and I'm not going to touch on all of these individually, but it gives you an idea of the sort of cumulative threats that woods and trees face. And some of these are more relevant to the sort of urban areas and areas like London than others. But what I'm going to talk to you really about is the sort of threats you might see to neighbourhood or urban trees. So development, like I say, something that we deal with fairly extensively. We do about 300 casework responses a year dealing with development and threats to ancient woods and ancient and veteran trees. And these types of developments can result in the loss of trees, or perhaps the encroachment on their root systems, which lead to their deterioration. Unfortunately, not all woods and trees are protected through planning policy, so this can be tough to combat. You also get issues such as homeowner issues and neighbour disputes, and that might be anything from sort of shading, leaf litter, animal droppings. Yet it is actually quite phenomenal how people care more about that sort of thing than the value that trees provide. Bizarre, isn't it? So safety concerns as well. Often these can be valid, but they're always worth questioning where possible. We know that trees sometimes are hazardous, and they can cause issues and they cause damage to either people or property. So people who care for and manage these trees have to be responsible. We often see that older trees are often accused of being dying or declining as their structural or physiological condition might not be what it used to be. This is very normal for older trees. It's just a part of the aging process. So we have to sort of question where possible. Subsidence, really tricky issue. I've actually got a couple of slides time. I'm going to be talking about that in a bit more detail. Suspect this is something that a couple of you have come up against in your time as well. Accidental damage, antisocial behaviour, deliberate vandalism. Humans do make mistakes sometimes, and those mistakes can result in damage to trees. And then humans can also be deliberate vandals as well, unfortunately. There are some among us. Not among us here, sorry. Tree felling going unchallenged and uncontested. If no one is actually seen to care if a tree is going to be felled or scheduled to be felled, then why would the landowners or even the sort of council care about that tree? So if trees are being felled and you do care about them, then we have to encourage you to speak up and you should encourage others to do so as well. It only increases the likelihood of protecting trees. So what protections do trees actually have? Well, the answer is very few. Very few legal protections are actually afforded to trees. You can get TPOs, which are tree preservation orders. They are set by local planning authorities, usually their tree officer, sometimes the planning team. And it basically means that where they are set, any works to those trees require permission from the local authority. If someone undertakes works to a TPO tree without permission, then that could result in potential prosecution and fines. It should be noted that planning permission does override tree preservation orders, and they can also be removed by the council, depending on the situation. Another sort of legal avenues to protect trees are felling licenses, which basically means that wherever someone is trying to fell more than 5 cubic meters of timber per calendar quarter, they will need a felling license. But there are exemptions to this. So, for example, the location is an important sort of exemption. Generally, a felling license is not required if the tree is in a garden, in an orchard, a churchyard, or maybe a designated open space like a village green or public park. And to put into sort of perspective what 5 cubic meters of timber looks like, I usually say imagine a tree being sort of put into a medium-sized Ford Transit van. So typically it would deal with sort of large mature trees. A large mature tree of say 20 meters in height and about 500 to 600 meters in millimeters, in stem diameter. That's probably going to be more than 5 cubic meters of timber. And so you would hope that some form of permission is going to be needed for that tree. And there are other sort of exemptions as well. I really encourage you to look into felling licenses and learn to understand them, what the exemptions might be, to understand if they might apply in any situations you're dealing with. And then there are policy protections for trees. So ancient woods and ancient and veteran trees are protected through national planning policy and often through local development plans as well. But very few other types of trees are. So if they're not designated in that sort of way, they're unlikely to receive any protection from their removal or any damage to them. So I want to talk to you about what you can do to protect trees from harm as well, because I think this is really important in community action. Development. So most development requires planning permission. So it's really worth becoming familiar with your local planning authority / council's planning register on their website, because this is where developments are considered, it's where documentation is uploaded, and it's where you can find out more about whether a tree might be under threat or not. So generally, new development is advertised. That might be online, it might be via posters, physical posters. Often you might see a planning application notice is physically attached to a tree as a sort of a laminated sheet of paper or a nearby sort of a lamppost. If you see that sort of thing, have a little read and see if it's something that you might be sort of concerned about. It will give you a reference number that you can then go use to investigate it further. You can also keep up to date on planning applications via weekly application lists that councils hold. So checking through one of those probably takes about a few hours a week, but can be worth doing, especially if you have a community group. Learning how to read planning applications is so important. Learn how to read tree reports and ARB surveys and ecological reports. They can seem complex at first. The more you read them, the more tuned you come to them. And if you're struggling with them at all, seek help. Conservation charities like the Trust and like CPRE are always sort of happy to help in this respect. So get in contact where you're struggling. And then a bit about subsidence as well. So like I said, this is a complicated issue, but lots of trees, especially in urban areas, are threatened with subsidence. And subsidence basically refers to the concept that a tree is resulting in issues to the foundations of buildings. And it's not usually sort of kind of the tree roots that are causing the issue, but the tree's impact on the soil around it. So this usually only happens where it's sort of kind of particular clay soils as well. So if you're coming up against subsidence, you need to be asking for information. You need to be asking for comprehensive evidence so that the evidence conclusively proves the tree's role in causing subsidence. You need to be asking about soil investigations and depth tests, assessments of soil characteristics. All of that sort of stuff is going to help you. And also the sort of kind of monitoring of data to ensure the reliability and the consistency of the subsidence is related to that tree. So those are things worth keeping in mind. Applying for a TPO. Apply for a TPO wherever possible. I should say there are a few rules around these, so do familiarise yourself with them. Typically, TPOs are only granted in the interests of amenity value. They're not about conservation interests or historical or cultural interests. They have to be a tree in a public place with amenity value to local people. So familiarise yourself with the terms around TPOs. And sort of conservation areas. You can often find the records for these on local planning authority websites. If you can't find them, get in contact with them. So it takes 6 months for a TPO to be confirmed. If planning permission has already been given for a site, the council are not going to award a TPO, unfortunately. But if you want to get that TPO secured, encourage others to contact the council about it as well. Contacting the right authorities is really important. So where you are seeing tree felling happening, or where you're concerned that it might happen, or you think that some sort of illegal felling has been undertaken, or works to a TPO tree without permission, you need to contact the right people. So if there's illegal felling, you'd want to go to folks like the Forestry Commission. If it's to do with sort of TPO breaches, it would be the local planning authority. If something like a breach of Wildlife and Countryside Act, where you're seeing the nesting birds being disturbed, you'd be going to like the Wildlife Crime Unit, for example. These are the authorities that have statutory powers and can take enforcement action. So they need to be sort of kind of engaged in this sort of process, to take pictures, make a log of things, report the damage and felling. Biting objections. So like I say, development usually needs permission to sort of going to go ahead in the form of planning application. If you find one that threatens trees, object to it, but always make sure that your objection is relevant. It needs to sort of kind of relate back to policy, and it also has to have material planning considerations in it as well. So stuff like a development affecting your house value, not a material planning consideration. The council's not going to take that into account. Do some reading on the gov.uk website about what material planning considerations are, because they're important, and always encourage others to do the same as well. Again, this is all about getting lots of other people to do the sort of the same thing, to build momentum, and always be clear, be concise, and use your evidence. And then lastly, just advice. A lot of you probably know a lot about this, but starting a community group is really valuable. Getting people together who are like-minded. Make sure there's appetite locally to do this. It's really hard to go and try and do this by yourself. And when you set it up, try and have a steering group that determines your aims and objectives as a group, what you want your members to do for you. You need to determine, do you need any funding or legal status to achieve your aims or objectives? And as you go, always come back and evaluate your work as well, and seek advice from those around you who are experts. So thank you very much. That's a brief look over woods and trees protection from me. Look forward to questions.
That was amazing, Jack. I've never seen so much information in 10 minutes, and you stuck to time. Incredible. Just take a deep breath. So people, please put any questions in the chat. Of course, Jack covered a huge amount there, and I'm sure that if you have questions now or later, you can we can put those to Jack either in this meeting or afterwards. And we will, of course, make the presentations available online, and we'll email everybody with a link to that afterwards. So, yeah, thanks so much for that. And I think that sets the context really well. We're going to move to Louise now, Louise Vass of the Friends of Finsbury Park. Louise, if you have a presentation, please load it up. Here we go. And yeah, I think we're good to go. So, Louise. you have to unmute.
Okay, can everybody see the slides?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm Louise Woss. I'm the lead on ecology at Friends of Finsbury Park. So we are a group that do a mix of things. We do a mix of practical things. So here's us doing some nature restoration work, which we've been doing for about 2.5 years. This is us planting a woodland. So trying to restore nature, trying to bring greater biodiversity to the park. But also we do quite a bit of work to protect the park from, and to hold the council accountable for some of the treatment of the park. So I'm going to talk today about soil compaction in the context of large-scale events which are increasingly happening in our park. They're getting bigger, they're taking more footfall, they're taking greater space, greater area, and increasingly they're in our areas which are our kind of woodland areas. So this is one image of the beautiful trees within our park. This is a heritage tree line, and really these heritage tree lines form the very backbone of our park. What would our park be without them? So these London planes are they were planted when the park was first created, I think 1869, so it's one of the first public parks outside of the royal parks. Very beautiful, but of course the event organisers, there's one particular event organiser, Cranach Brothers, that very much want the kind of forest vibe for their events. And when they asked for this space, the council just said yes, and didn't really pay attention to the kind of tree protections that they would need to put into place for the planning of an event in such a delicate space. So the event actually takes place on this carriageway. And last year we had to, having asked for tree protections and not getting them, we had to very much go in and kind of take photographs and make that very public to kind of get the council to act on our behalf and to do better protections, because people are quite shocked by the kind of lack of respect or lack of knowledge around soil compaction and the damage that can cause. This is just so a bit more context. This is where the event happens. You can see the north side is still quite well wooded. We have the tree lines, you can see the avenues of trees, but also we've got an arboretum, and also we have oaks between 250 and 350 years old that predate the park, that were part of the Hornsey Wood, and Mackenzie would have built the park and designed the park around these oaks. And we want acknowledgement for these oaks. They're not ancient as yet, they're not over 400 years old, but they're getting that way. In order for them to get to that age, we need to put protections in place. This is what it looked like in 2023. These are just a couple of images, and residents, shocked residents, were sending in lots of other images. We've got shipping containers, we've got fridges, we've got all manner of equipment, and that's not, I'm not showing you here the images of the trucks that bring all of this in. It's a huge construction site. Here's some of the JCBs, 7-ton machines that are driving over root plates of these trees. As you can see, scars left behind that have been photographed again by residents. You can see one of the beautiful planes that I showed you earlier here, scarred by equipment hitting it, but also proof that the equipment are driving over the roots. So looking at the context of all of this, we feel that trees in public parks are facing multiple stresses. We've got pollutants. Finsbury Park is surrounded by 3 main roads. So you've got all of that air pollution. You've got actually glyphosate being used for years and years and years. You've got drought and flooding. So we're fluctuating between either drought, very arid summers, or very wet summers like this summer. And it's on a hill. So the middle of the park is on a hill. So the north side is often flooded, as is bits of the south. And then you've got major storm events. So in 2021, we have lost several trees when there was a storm in May, when the leaves were on the trees. So there's that. And then on top of that, we've got these event constructions, traffic, heavy vehicles, just driving wherever they want across the land. Across the landscape, and then also the weather impact. So this summer, the Festival Republic event was preceded by a massive downfall, and soils are compacted more when it's wet. So it turned into a mud bath, but you can imagine the greater extent of the compaction. And then the footfall, the events have got larger and larger, and the Festival Republic on the south side is now 50,000 people per day. And then on top of that, we've got tree disease coming in. We've got weakened trees, which are more susceptible to disease. We've got several trees with the Masarai disease, the planes over, I think we've got about 100, 150 planes in the park. And then we've got oak processionary moth and ash dieback, because we're over mowing, and we've over mowed for so long. And this has led to huge biodiversity loss. We need to really get a different mowing regime going to increase the resilience of these trees. Now you can see the soil compaction. What is it? Let's just take this definition. It's the hardening of soil due to the continuous wheel or foot traffic, which squeezes the soil particles, the soil pocket, so the roots can't grow. So if the roots can't grow, that affects the crown, and we are seeing crown dieback on some of the plains, especially on the south side. But also when you know that as the soil becomes harder, it's less flood resilient, so the water sits on top of the soil. But as I say, when we do have storm events, the trees are less resilient because the buttress roots are affected and therefore can't hold the tree and make it so stable. So it is a major problem. You can't quite see this picture at the bottom, but we've got lots of this that shows compaction in the park, where the tree roots are becoming very, very visible, the immediate tree roots from the trunk. This is how compaction affects the soil. So the pockets become tight, there's just no room for oxygen and the water and the nutrients, so the root becomes smaller, and therefore the plant becomes smaller. And you can see that in some of the trees in Finsbury Park, that they're quite kind of stunted in their growth. But the north side, as I say, we're trying to really protect that so it doesn't end up like the south, which has less good plant health. Here is an example to show how beyond the drip line, we need to protect beyond the drip line of the tree. So beyond the canopy is where the most delicate roots are that take in all the oxygen and the water and the nutrients. And that's in the top half a metre of the soil. So when they put the walls up for these events, they put metre-long stakes into the roots as well, which we feel is a major issue. They shouldn't be putting these metal stakes with pneumatic drills into the root plates. Now, who else thinks this is a problem? We had to do, I present today not as an expert, but as someone who just cares passionately about the park and wants it improving, not degrading. So Hampstead Heath did a study. Even the paths around Hampstead Heath, the trees that sit on the paths around the heath are affected. The health of those trees are affected by soil compaction. And they do very good management reports, and they do very good protections around their veteran trees. They do have ancient trees. I say our trees are veteran trees and they're heritage trees. The Woodland Trust did this brilliant report, which we've used a lot with the council, 2012, excellent guidance. Of course, events increasingly want these beautiful settings next to ancient, veteran and notable trees, but we have to make sure they do this in a responsible way. Haringey Council have a 3-metre rule, but they're breaching it all the time. It's in their policy, but they don't follow it. So again this year they've tried to improve slightly, but nowhere enough. Jeff Duckett, he works with us, he's worked with us in the past, he did a tree health walk this year from the Natural History Museum. He said there is no surer way to kill a tree slowly than to starve it of its oxygen and its water. And Greg Packman, who walked with us on one of our tree walks, said soil compaction is the second biggest tree health risk in urban parks after climate change. So looking at what the Woodland Trust say, what is their guidance? Their guidance is if it's a mature tree, you have to protect the root zone that should be protected with some kind of barrier, some kind of cordoning off, should be 12 times the diameter of the trunk if it's a mature tree, and if it's an ancient tree, it's 15 times the diameter of the tree trunk. So that's what we're calling for, and I'm not sure where the 3 meters came from, but it's not enough. So looking again at the Woodland Trust guidance, just to pull some of the things out of there, they say that you can start seeing this early decline of the trees. It triggers this compaction, it triggers the spiraling where the crown dies back, and increasingly it needs pruning of decaying limbs. And the more valuable a tree, the more sensitive it is. The older the tree, the more sensitive it is. And of course, if we don't show it that care, it's going to lead to premature death. So we need all the stakeholders working together to avoid this damage. We've not yet achieved it in Finsbury Park, but we'll keep pushing for that. And we want, and what the Woodland Trust says, is we must have this agricultural method statement attached to every contract with these major events companies. And also they should not be allowed to cut off branches to allow HGVs in, and that has happened historically in Finsbury Park, and we're really calling for that not to happen. It's absolutely unacceptable. There are very real results after the events. Here's the soil, very cracked. Here is early autumn, so we're getting this a lot. It's happening right now after the events go. You know, the grounds are covered, so the dry ground becomes very dry, and then a lot of the tree lines go into early autumn. So very real impacts happening right now. Now, what are they doing in other countries? I thought this was interesting when I was in Lyon just a few weeks ago, how on the just a little park here, they're protecting because they value these plane trees so much that for the shade and the beauty and the aesthetics, they've got cultural value. They're protecting them with these small fences. Why can't we do that? This is what we're asking now for our campaign. We want events-free spaces where there's dense tree canopy. It's incompatible to bring all this equipment in these densely populated areas. Project images of trees. I'm sure some of the people that go to the festivals wouldn't mind that. Absolutely no sacrificing of tree limbs. We want heritage tree lines recognised, restored and protected, and gaps filled, because they have been taken out as well. And we want the areas demarcated along with these agricultural method statements. We want that all to be made public. And we want all-weather vehicle routes to be demarcated, so the vehicles can't just drive wherever they want, because it's a free-for-all at the moment. And the plan for the public to be made public, what the wet weather plan is, or extreme drought, and all the subcontractors to be rigorously supervised. This is not my ideas, it's all come from the Woodland Trust Great Report. And this small low fencing to go in round our most veteran trees, for us to map those out, know exactly where they are, and for the events organisers then to put their plan in place around it and acknowledging the protection of these trees. Mulching around other trees, and no mowing between and around tree lines for biodiversity gain, and no air injection, because they come in and they inject air into the soil afterwards, and it's not proven, it's clay soil, and it just compresses down again. So that's just, we want prevention, not mitigation. This is from the Woodland Trust's lovely ancient tree protection. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Please, if you're in a park, join the Friends group, do what we're doing, try and hold the council to account to put better protections in place. This is all the stuff that was happening in Finsbury Park, and we're slowly trying to get them to stop. Thank you. Any questions later?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Louise. And I don't know about everybody else, but I learned a gigantic amount there. And that adds very neatly to Jack's presentation earlier. I just like the link to the NOMO or LOMO. That hadn't occurred to me at all. The importance, just the incredible importance of guardians, people to, hold the council to account, or actually just inform. I think often it's really just, councillors have a lot going on, and it's just about making sure that people know what's important, isn't it? So that was super interesting. And we're now at 1 o'clock, so we'll move directly on to Giovanna Iozzi. Joe.
Iozzi, yeah.
Introduce yourself, sorry.
Yeah, did everyone just get, I just lost my connection. Can you all hear me okay? I completely got sort of thrown out of the meeting.
Oh,
okay.
no. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for brilliant presentations, both of you. Fantastic. Loads of info. It's so glad that you're sharing this and recording it, because I'm sure there's too much for, and I'm afraid that I'm also got quite a lot of info on my slides. I'm not going to focus on everything, but just, you know, the main points. Can you see my slides okay? I'm just gonna.
Yeah, got them.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we're the Haringey Tree Protectors. You may have heard of us, you may have not. We're a grassroots campaign tree group set up during COVID in March 2021. Our contact details are there, and I was just going to say at the top of my little talk, if anyone wants any advice about insurance claims or threats against trees in the urban environment, do get in touch with us, because we do have an FAQ sheet which tries to say what we did, knowledge we've learned, and yeah, we'll try and help as much as we can. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of what you can do, but there are lots of different things you can do. Okay, so urban tree felling is happening everywhere. You know, you'll probably recognize some of these pictures, the Sydenham Gap tree. There was a wonderful oak that was felled in Peterborough. That's an HS2 picture, that's Plymouth. So just a bit of a horror show of images there for you. And I think when you're a tree campaigner, you start to see and notice trees being felled all the time, much more than a normal person. I think this is really important about accountability and data, and a lack of transparency about how many trees we're actually losing. There was a report recently done by a journalist that I spoke to who did an FOI to lots of councils in the UK. Not all the councils responded. So the data is really flawed. Like, the numbers are probably much higher than almost 500,000 trees in the last 10 years. Who's keeping count? You know, people, I mean, you can understand really why local authorities might not, because it's so unpopular to fell trees, especially now. But no one is properly keeping the data. Neither DEFRA nor the Forestry Commission keep records of trees felled on at a national level in terms of urban local authority fellings. And DEFRA says local authorities should be keeping their own records, but not all local authorities do. Deregulation has really been bad for trees. So since the rules were loosened for planners since 2012, it's been successively loosened since. So that's a real issue as well. So a lot of our kind of macro aims are looking at the legislature, the legal structure, the legal or lack of protections for trees, and how we might be able to tighten those up. That's going to involve a lot of lobbying. But yeah, so I just thought I'd sort of draw your attention to some things there. Trees are now big news, you know, as the climate and nature crisis worsens. I think people locally are just seeing it's a kind of material evidence-based kind of experience-based, you know, we're literally seeing trees being felled as our nature crisis gets worse and worse. So I think it's a very concrete way for people to get involved in local campaigning and to really try to, you know, protect the kind of the urban nature that we have. Let's face it, we don't have much in cities on enough. So that's the Sydenham Gap tree, obviously Banksy, the Banksy tree that was quite brutally pollarded. And yeah, so trees are big news, and I think things are starting to shift in the public narrative about trees. And I think there are little bits of shifts. There are shifts coming in, but I think there's still a long way to go. So I think Jack, is it Jack? Yeah, he covered a lot of the threats to urban trees, but we're seeing a lot of insurance claims against trees, and it's really important to note that the insurance industry has established enough case law. Like, why does this happen? Why do insurers have this power over what local authorities do with trees? Well, it's because they've established over decades, since the 70s, really, the droughts of the 70s, they've established enough case law so that a tree only has to be implicated in damage to be felled. So that's really important to be aware of that. It's 99% of the time not the direct cause of damage to a property. It's a cause, it's a factor. But so they only have to implicate a tree in damage to fell it. So that's a really important, that needs to change. We're seeing obviously urbanisation. We've had a housing development, St Anne's in Haringey, where there was a wonderful arboretum of trees, many of which were felled. There's a lot of bad tree management we're seeing in Haringey. I don't know whether you're seeing it in your area, but topping. So one of the pictures here, this picture shows something, it's very, very severe pollarding. It's very bad for the health of the tree. This is a wonderful old plane tree. It destabilizes the tree, and it sends it into a kind of stressful state where a lot of epicormic growth is sort of pushed out, and it makes it, it sends it into decline, really. So we're seeing more of that happening with residents, like Jack mentioned. I think we're seeing residents, trends for extensions, renovations, light. There's a lot of ignorance around trees, and I think we could do with a national campaign about how important trees are in your garden, and all the heat stress due to compaction, climate, droughts, etc. I'm not going to dwell too much on this slide because this is very particular to Haringey, but I do, although I the residential street planting schemes, although they would be, I think they're a really good idea if we weren't losing so many existing mature trees, where there are places like streets with very few trees, or if they were new planting, fantastic. The problem I have is that we're often seeing these new kind of fruit ornamental varieties being planted. Arbs have told me they often only live for about 13 years. So we're kind of, it's kind of like getting rid of a cathedral to replace with a kind of caravan. That's the only analogy I can think of. It's quite a bad one, but so I'm ambivalent about these residential schemes that residents have to pay for partially. They look great, don't they? But actually what we really our focus really is protecting what we have, keeping those big canopy trees in place in situ, because the big canopy trees are the ones that are doing the hardest work for us, as we all know. They're cooling our streets, they're dispersing flood water. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about that. Right. So I'm going to talk about a specific, just briefly. I call this Operation White Tarp. So one of our campaigns, and the tree is still standing, you'll be glad to hear, is a big plane tree in my area. We have an unusual area in Haringey and Stroud Green, where we have a lot of very beautiful large plane trees planted by the Victorians. This is one literally at the end of my road, and one day I saw a sign on it saying tree to be felled due to a nearby claim. I knocked on the door, and then a whole kind of experience came out of this and campaign. We really wanted this to be a test case against the insurance industry, because the tree, it's a very, very complicated case, but a financial ombudsman report stated in 2018 that the tree, don't worry about the tree, leave the tree alone, and stated that the insurer should just do the work on the house because the house has very bad foundations. And ever since, there's been a battle, the insurer, the council, trying to get this tree down. And so we really wanted to, use it as a test case to say, hang on a minute, this is a flawed rigged system. Trees often aren't the direct cause of damage. Let's look at the insurance industry instead and what they're not doing for people. We all pay high premiums for our houses. There's something going very badly wrong here. This was the council decided in its wisdom to do a dawn raid and cover the tree in white tarp at 4:30 a.m. on March the 12th last year, and it didn't go down well. Okay. So we got a lot of press on it, and Tim Adams in the Observer did a piece on it. But again, we're not trying to get publicity for publicity's sake here. We're trying to expose a system which is really flawed and is not working for residents or nature and the trees that they love. And we protected the tree for about 6 months. Someone was living in the tree. It's gone through so many different hearings, and we're now waiting for the outcome of a judicial review. So we're really, really hoping that the judicial review will, although it's not directly actually about the tree, it's more about the process by which the council took the steps they took against the homeowner. We're hoping that the outcome will be positive ultimately for the tree. We don't know. We may not get that outcome. But I think councils generally need to be braver, and Paul Powsland, the barrister for nature, has suggested that councils should get together, because of lack of funds, and try and fight these claims to get a few more test cases on the books to counter the insurers' legal precedents. And so it goes on. A wonderful oak tree near me in Stroud Green is threatened with an insurance claim. It's a wonderful oak, and it's already, as you can see, being pollarded. And every year now it's in the death spiral. So the tree gets pollarded more and more, and eventually we may lose this wonderful oak. Oaks, obviously, we all know how important they are for biodiversity. They support 2,500 species. I think, hang on, if I missed no. So what can you do? Okay, so legislation is the problem, the lack of legal protection. So trees, there is the public duty to consult now from the Environment Act 2021. So the duty requires local authorities to consult with local residents on the felling of street trees where no exemptions apply. Now, insurance claims are not one of the exemptions, interestingly enough. So that means it's worth contacting your local tree department and asking how they're going to be implementing this new bit of law. Unfortunately, Jack said the wildlife crime unit, I was astonished and shocked to find that it's been dissolved, or it's going to be, the funding's gone. So someone needs to do a petition about that, and there probably is one, because the wildlife police, when I've called them, have been really amazing in following up. Like, I found a live bird nest in a tree and they were trying to prune it, and I stopped them. So I'm really worried about that. We set up a national group. So we're called Canopy, and we're a new national coalition of grassroots tree campaigners. We'd love you to join us. We're going to have a new kind of toolkit we advise other campaign groups on what they can do when a tree is threatened and the steps that we've taken. I think we're about 30 or 40 groups now, but we're also lobbying. Our macro aim is to lobby for a tighter protection of a tree in law. So really to try and get something tabled, a private members, bill. It's very hard to get those on the table, but we're really going to try and lobby in Parliament over the next few years. Please do join us. Our email address is there on our website. Check us out. And yeah, we're quite a new group, but we're it's a very, very positive thing. And I think, yeah, the law really is where we're aiming, as well as our local campaigning. What's happening on a structural level is really where we're going to try and do some work to improve conditions for trees. Thanks very much. I hope I was under 10 minutes, but anyway.
I really don't mind, Gia. It's absolutely incredible what you do, and for a new group. I mean, and clearly way beyond what's going on in Haringey. It's not just about Haringey. It's got so many implications, ramifications. So, and it's just so good to know that there's now a national group which is trying to tackle some of the the issues which need to be tackled across the country. Yeah, so just so great to hear from all of you. And just before I forget to say a huge thank you for an incredible amount of work that you do, all of you. It's just stupendous. So I think we can all be hugely grateful for that. So if I think I might ask people to put hands up if you have questions, actually, because we've got a lot of people in the room, 53 people, so that's great. I don't see any hands up yet. So, we've got one hand, Chaz. So Chaz, do you go?
Yeah, hi, thanks very much for the presentations, very good. I'm a local councillor in Richmond upon Thames, and frequently-ish, I get reports from the arboricultural officer talking about trees which have to be felled because they're diseased. What advice would you have for me in terms of interrogating those reports?
Who wants to go first? Anyone? Jack, do you?
So just to clarify, Chaz, who was saying the trees are diseased? Sorry,
So it's the arboricultural officer at the council. So he produces a report saying these trees need to be felled because, and then gives various reasons. Mainly it's because of disease that a tree will need to be felled. But I mean, in some cases, I would look at a tree and go, "There's nothing wrong with it." Obviously, I can't see. I can't really see the potential internal damage.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer. I'm obviously a lay person who's learned. I've been involved in campaigning, but I think it's really about transparency of the reports. So really, you should be asking, especially with the public duty to consult now, although it is one of the exemptions. So if a tree is dead, diseased, or dying, it is. And I think actually, unfortunately, we're seeing that being used more and more because it's very. But I would just ask for greater clarity and transparency. So the full arboricultural report, all the kind of different reports that can be done, on the soil and the trunk, and so it should be a full, report and not to be fobbed off with just a kind of email saying, oh, it's just diseased, because I think you just need to get all the information, and every tree that is to be felled, it's such a serious thing. It should have had an arboriculturist. It should have really have been observed and monitored over a year as well. I mean, there are certain steps that your tree department should be taking for every single tree. If it's a really, I mean, I'd say every tree is important, but I think to get an independent arboricultural report as well is especially if it's a very controversial tree or a group of trees that residents are really upset about. So just asking for greater clarity, transparency, all the reports, because really they should be producing those. I think that would be your first, rather than just an email saying, yeah, it's disease, and not probing or questioning any further. And they can do pickers tests where you can look inside a trunk as well. And what kind of disease is it? Ganoderma is often used as a reason, a justification for felling. In our area, I've seen increasingly, but Ganoderma is a sort of bracket fungal disease, but it doesn't mean necessarily that every tree. Some trees can deal with that quite well and they can bracket it off, and so it doesn't necessarily mean that a tree is going to imminently fall. I mean, and also trees, the risk for trees is ridiculously high. It's like you're more likely to die by a wheelie bin, hit by a wheelie bin. It's like 1 in 10 million chance that you'll be hit by a tree, but the risk factors are held, they're really held to such a high degree. And I think, yeah, it just needs more probing and investigation. That's what I would say your first port of call would be.
I would say a responsible landowner should probably have like a full tree condition survey of all trees on their land every 3 years, and generally do sort of inspections every year, as Joe said. So yeah, exactly what you said. There needs to be that sort of full reporting of the sort of kind of condition of the tree, and if you are able to sort of kind of get reports of that tree and its condition, say 3 years back, and the other 3 years back before then as well, and you can build a picture of the tree's physiological and structural condition over that time, then that can sort of help to possibly contest that. But I think Gio's suggestion about the getting a sort of independent consultant and report to have a look at that would be a really sort of wise thing to do. They can be a little bit costly, but a bit of sort of crowdfunding, or if there's a local community group who are able to sort of help with that sort of thing, I'm sure they'll be able to sort of stump up the money for at least a survey.
Thanks, yeah, and I think that was a really good question, because I think we do hear from quite a lot of people, and we worked a few years ago with a campaign group in Tooting about a whole avenue of chestnuts, which was devastating. Were they felled in the end? I'm not sure, but
I would also say that most trees have an element of disease in them, and it's like, like humans, we're not all perfect inside and out, and as the climate crisis worsens, more diseases are coming, insects are coming from abroad, so there are more threats against trees, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the tree has to be felled. It could be managed carefully. But that really goes back to tree departments being under-resourced and under-financed. They need bigger budgets to look after these street trees, and often they just don't have the budget. So I do, to some extent, sympathise with what yeah.
That was really, really helpful. So we'll move to Alistair now. I think that's Alistair Binny Lubbock, is it?
It is, yeah.
Hi, Al. So Al is my local councillor as well, by some random.
Yeah, so local councillor in Hackney. Unfortunately, I can't switch on my camera for some reason, but just a quick one. Sometimes things are outside of the realms of the local authority, and as you pointed out, going to the right people, I think is very important. One of the issues that I've been encountering is obviously Network Rail. There's lots of land where Network Rail is in charge of tree maintenance and things like that. So I'm just wondering if you had any tips on how to engage them, because I found them to be a bit of a brick wall in terms of being able to get some information from them. They've recently cut down a lot of trees alongside a bit of railway in my ward, and so I'm reaching out to them about that. But it seems a bit opaque, and they sort of cite safety concerns, but I feel like that could be quite broad in the case of the rail. So it's yeah. Any thoughts you had would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in again. I'm actually involved in a big battle with Network Rail, Alistair, so I think maybe we should connect, because it's been going on for quite a few months. So I don't know if you want to email me at Haringey Tree Protectors, because the Tree Council, unfortunately, because it's private land, it's very, very difficult. But yeah, they're doing the same in the railway track near Finsbury Park and up to where we are. And it's been a long battle. We've got a critical friend. The Tree Council is trying to mediate, but it's not going very well. So they have a wonderful nature and biodiversity action plan, but on the ground it's just slash and burn, as they've always done. So yeah, maybe we should connect, so maybe we can share tips. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks for raising that one out, because I've had so many calls over the years from really distressed people who used to have the whole lush border, and suddenly it's just gone, and that's just devastating. And as we're facing in that little area near, which is near where I live, so hopefully you can hook up. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Alice. I was just saying it might be worth having a look at the Varley review, which Network Rail had to sort of kind of undertake in 2019, I think it was. I think the rail minister at the time, Bojo's brother, Joe, he commissioned John Varley to undertake this independent review into Network Rail's approach to vegetation management. So it's well worth having a look at that. And using anything sort of within that when you're having conversations with the Network Rail. It sort of relates to the last question a little bit, because you've got both issues are to do with sort of the landowners that have a lot of sort of responsibility for sort of public safety. And so they are often also, this is sort of kind of in the interests of saving and being sort of kind of cost effective, they're going to take the sort of kind of cheaper options, and instead of sort of kind of managing vegetation over a sort of kind of a certain number of years, they'll probably default to sort of kind of felling it. So in the case of Network Rail, felling it to keep it away from lines and to remove sort of kind of leaf litter. In the case of dead and disease trees, fell it now rather than having to sort of kind of manage it and manage its sort of kind of decline in the future. So it's tough. I think it's almost like it's sort of a behavioural cultural thing that we have to shift to move away from having such a huge emphasis on sort of kind of health and safety and being so risk averse, and moving more towards a sort of kind of attention first approach. But I mean, Gio touched on it already, that the sort of implications for local authorities in terms of sort of kind of costs are massive. That might not be the same for Network Rail, to be honest.
Okay, that was a really good question as well. Two very big issues raised so far. So we're going to move to Suzanne Wise, who is in fact the chair of our Board of Trustees. Hi, Suzanne.
Yeah, hi Alice. Well, firstly, just to say, I mean, I've learned so much. It's been an amazing. I mean, the presentations have been amazing. So thank you so much for all the energy and passion. I had one suggestion, and then can I come back on Network Rail as well? Just in relation to Gio, I think it was your point about needing legislative protection, and I don't know whether this is a stupid idea or not, but the Climate and Nature Bill has been accepted as one of the private members' bills, which will be going forward. And I just wonder if there's any possibility of getting some sort of amendment attached to that as it goes through. I mean, just an idea. I have no idea how possible that would be. But it looks as if that's going to run all the way through. So that was the comment. And then I did just want to pick up on Network Rail. I used to work at Network Rail. I was General Counsel and Company Secretary. I'm not anymore. And I'm not surprised with some of the comments, because I think the mindset was absolutely 100% health and safety. And if there was any risk of a tree falling on a line causing a collision, or leaves falling on a line and impacting ability to brake in an emergency, then there was a gut reaction, well, we just fell the trees. And that was the mindset shift when I was there, the mindset when I was there. And I know from having conversations with my former colleagues who are still in Network Rail that since that Varley report, there is a lot of work happening to try and change that mindset shift. But whether it is yet translated into practice on the ground, I don't know. But I feel as if I'm slightly apologising or being a spokesperson for them, and I haven't worked for them for over 7 years. But I know there is that work on mindset change really happening and being focused on at Network Rail. So I don't know whether that's helpful or not, but thank you.
I would reflect the same. We often get sort of kind of inquiries about Network Rail felling, and have done for sort of kind of many years now, especially for the 10 years I've been at the Trust. Since the value review, those have decreased, and I think one of the things that they worked towards Network Rail was doing more sort of kind of community outreach and engagement. If they're not doing that at a sort of local level, that becomes concerning, and that's when you could try and get in contact with their national. I do have a couple of contacts at their sort of kind of national level that I'd be happy to put you in contact with, Gio and Alistair as well. So if you want to touch base afterwards, I can give you.
And so do I as well. If you,
yes,
if
Yeah.
you need some names, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Can I just leap in as well, Sarah here from the Tree Council, just to say that I've put a message in the chat as well, that we are the critical friend to Network Rail. And in fact, the Varley review we were very involved in. I think 4 or 5 days after I began with the Tree Council, there was a terrible tree felling that went on at Hadley Wood, which resulted in the Varley review. And we have seen over the years that there has been a lot of improvement. Whereas previously they were great engineers, but they were not great conservationists. That is changing. There are now more environment and conservation people in their teams. Things do still go wrong. We do still have to fight incredibly hard. It's true, but I think what Suzanne said, we have to bear in mind the health and safety as well of passengers and train drivers, whilst balancing that with the environment. So it's a tricky one. But if Alistair or anybody would like to be in touch with the Tree Council, we do talk all the time with Network Rail, and we'll be very happy to get involved.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for coming to the event. And I probably should say that we could probably have about 10 events on this subject alone and invite a lot of people along. So I'm sure it would have been great to have had you speak as well, but just couldn't fit everything in. So
can I just say something actually, that the shift that is, we're not, in our experience so far, we're not actually seeing that shift happen on the ground. And we've seen a lot of really horrible cutting back so far in the rail track near us. So something's not shifting enough. And although I salute people trying to work with Network Rail, I think ultimately there's still, the narrative needs to shift further. It's just, they're just not really getting it. So anyway, that's we're in the eye of the storm at the moment, and we're trying to sort of save a wood near us. So yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. So so we're going to move on to Marie Rabelais, who I've worked with in Hounslow before now. So it's good to see you here too, Marie. So what was your question? Or
well, it was more of a comment. We've just had an example of Network Rail really heavily cutting back near Gunnersbury Station. And I don't know whether it's true for all councils, but most of the land along railway lines is designated by Hounslow Council as a site of importance to nature conservation, because they provide corridors linking different areas. So the councils should really be objecting. But the trouble is with Network Rail, it's too late, when you see what they've done. But Network Rail should be aware that these are important sites for nature conservation, for, as I say, for birds, for mammals, insects, the whole lot. So there ought to be more account taken of that, and I agree that what is needed is a whole shift in thinking about this. But councils, as we know, are strapped. I mean, I don't know that our council has a tree officer, because street trees are the responsibility of Hounslow Highways, which is one of these PFI contractors. And we're lucky, unlike Sheffield, at least they haven't been chopping down all our street trees, but there is a difficulty in getting them to really look after them properly.
Thanks, Marie. Yeah, so it feels like it's like basically we're being, it's all fronts. It's a really, really huge set of problems, and so I think that it's incredibly good news that Canopy has been formed, and yeah, I think probably there's going to be need for capacity there, isn't there, and that's going to need to grow. So huge good luck with that. I don't see any more hands up, but please do put your hand up right now if you do have a question. If not, I'm just going to ask the participants if we have any further questions. I understand if people need to leave now. Obviously, we're just at 1:30, so if otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up, because I can't imagine an hour which hasn't been more informative. So, which has been more informative than this one, and I just think, you know, we can all just be happy with where we've got to in the last hour. So yeah, I can't see any more hands up. If our speakers don't have anything further to add, then I'm sure they probably would add another couple of hours if they if they thought that was a good idea. Then I'll wrap it up, and just say thanks so much to everybody for attending. It has been a very popular webinar, so we've had over 50 people here, and I kind of feel like that means that I think probably some kind of follow-up in maybe 6 months might be a good idea. And just to say again, a massive thanks for the work that you're doing. Finally, I should say that we do our webinars for free, but we will put a link to our donation page in a follow-up email, because obviously everything costs a little bit of money. So if you're able to contribute a little bit, that would be amazing. And yeah, thanks very, very much, everybody.
Thanks very much. Thanks to everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.